Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You're hot. That's what the bartender said. Just a passing comment as she handed me my drink, smiling. Casual. Effortless. No agenda. But when I turned around, I saw it. Rachel, my wife, was standing 6 feet behind me. Frozen. Her eyes locked on the bartender's smile like it was a loaded weapon. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw something flash in her eyes. Jealousy. It would have been flattering if it wasn't so ironic. Because just 2 nights earlier, Rachel had looked me dead in the face and said, "I don't feel anything when you touch me anymore." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded. But that moment, her reaction to someone else wanting me, rewrote the entire story I'd been telling myself. The story where I was unwanted, invisible, irrelevant. Turns out, she did care. Just not in the way a wife should. That night at the bar wasn't a date. It wasn't anything. Just a work function. I wasn't even trying to impress anyone. But when that woman said what Rachel hadn't said in years, everything in me went quiet. Because I remembered who I used to be. And more importantly, I saw exactly who Rachel had become. The drive home was silent, but not the comfortable kind. Rachel sat stiff in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone like it owed her an apology. No eye contact. No words. Just tension thick enough to choke on. She finally broke the silence as we pulled into the driveway. "So, you gonna tell me who she was?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew none of them mattered. If she wanted to know who the bartender was more than she cared about the bartender's words, that said everything. I went inside, kicked off my shoes, and walked straight to the bedroom. Not angry. Not loud. Just done. She followed me in, arms crossed. "I saw the way you smiled at her." That made me laugh. Quiet. Bitter. Not because it was funny, but because this was the most emotion she'd shown toward me in months. Not when I brought her dinner after a long day. Not when I rubbed her shoulders while she stared blankly at the TV. Not even when I booked a weekend trip to reconnect. One she canceled last minute to rest. But the second someone else saw value in me, suddenly I was interesting again. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at her, really looked, and realized something. She hadn't lost interest in me. She just thought I'd never leave. And that was her real mistake. She thought my patience was weakness. She thought my silence meant surrender. But she had no idea what kind of man gets born in that kind of silence. And by the time she figured it out, she'd already lost me. I just hadn't moved out yet. The shift didn't come like a storm. It didn't scream. It whispered. The morning after the bartender's comment, Rachel was up early. Dressed. Makeup done. She made coffee, for both of us. That hadn't happened in months. She handed me the cup like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't spent the last year treating me like a roommate she barely tolerated. I took it, said thanks, then walked past her like I didn't notice the sudden kindness. Because I wasn't supposed to. This was her opening move. The first of many. Not an apology. Not an admission. Just a silent attempt to reset the power dynamic. She felt it now, the shift. The tension. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't hers anymore. And that terrified her in a way my silence never had. At work, I sat at my desk and scrolled through photos on my phone. Not memories of us. No, those were long gone. Deleted one night around 2 a.m., after she rolled away from me in bed for the 100th time. I looked at photos of me. From before. Before I stopped smiling. Before I stopped being seen. Before I became wallpaper in my own life. And that's when I realized something I hadn't dared to admit before. I missed myself. Not her. Not us. Me. That night, she asked if I wanted to watch a movie together. Same couch she used to avoid sitting next to me on. Same shows she'd binge without asking if I wanted to join. Now suddenly, she wanted quality time. I said I had emails to catch up on. She stared at me for a second too long. Like she was trying to decode something she used to understand perfectly. But I gave her nothing. No reaction. No irritation. Just calm detachment. Because I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was observing. Studying. Planning. That week, I moved the spare car key from the hook in the hallway to a drawer in my office. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I'd started to think about what life would look like without her. I changed my passwords. Quietly. No announcement. She didn't notice, yet. But she would. She'd notice when the attention she thought she could reclaim didn't come crawling back. She'd notice when her small performances, homemade dinner, random compliments, the sudden lingerie, stopped working. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. She wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to win control. And I wasn't hers to control anymore. She just hadn't figured that out yet. But she would, piece by piece. Because when someone starts pulling away slowly, it's not always a plea for help. Sometimes, it's an exit plan. By the third day, I saw it in her eyes. Not guilt. Not love. Panic. Rachel was waking up in a different reality, one where I wasn't orbiting around her anymore. And for someone who fed off control, indifference was a language she couldn't translate. I watched her adjust. She started dressing better around the house. Tight tops, that old perfume I used to compliment her on. She asked if I liked the new meal she cooked, some Pinterest recipe she'd mocked months ago. I said it was fine. No praise. No warmth. Just polite, efficient cold. And she flinched like it was a slap. She wasn't used to it. The absence of validation. The empty space where my attention used to live. For years, I gave her everything. Every ounce of support, effort, presence. She didn't notice when I gave it, but now she noticed its absence like a slow bleed. She asked me about my day over dinner. I answered with one sentence and went back to eating. She asked if I wanted to go out Saturday night, just the two of us. I told her I had plans. I didn't explain, and I didn't lie. I did have plans. Plans to reclaim the parts of my life I had buried under years of trying to earn someone who didn't want to be kept. That night, she tried something bold. She walked into the bedroom wearing the black slip I once told her made my heart stop. She stood by the door like she expected the lights to dim and the music to swell. I didn't even look up. She stood there for a full minute, then walked to the bathroom and shut the door quietly. Not slamming it. Not angry. Just defeated. That was the moment it clicked for her. She wasn't trying to seduce me anymore. She was trying to get back into a house she'd already burned down. But the locks had changed, and she didn't even know it yet. The next morning, I left earlier than usual. I didn't wake her. Didn't say goodbye. I just sat in my car, sipped my coffee, and stared at the sunrise like it belonged to me again. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not because I was cheating. Not because I had found someone else. But because, for the first time, I realized I didn't need her to want me for me to want myself back. She thought the bartender's comment was the problem. She had no idea it was the solution. The spark that reignited everything she tried to dim in me. And now? Now I was just getting started. By the end of the week, her mask began to crack. Rachel started doing things she hadn't done in years. Folded my laundry. Left a note in my gym bag. Something vague like, "Have a great workout," smiley face. The kind of thing I used to leave for her until she stopped acknowledging them. Now she was copying old versions of me, hoping I wouldn't notice. But I noticed everything. Every forced smile. Every pause before speaking. Every glance to see if I was watching. I wasn't. Not in the way she wanted. I had become a mirror. And she didn't like what she saw reflected back. Her own emptiness. Her own neglect. The more she tried to reconnect, the more obvious it became that she wasn't doing it out of love. It was fear. She was losing control of a man she thought would never leave. I came home late Friday. Not on purpose. Just didn't feel like rushing anymore. Walked into the kitchen to see candles lit, pasta on the stove, jazz playing softly in the background. It was everything I used to do for her. Every detail, recreated like a memory she was desperate to relive. She stood there in a dress I hadn't seen since our second anniversary. I nodded once. "Smells good." Then walked past her to the living room. Didn't sit at the table. Didn't ask what was for dinner. Just sat in silence, pulled out my laptop, and started working. She stood frozen for a beat, then slowly turned the music off. That's when the shift in her started. The realization that this wasn't a phase. I wasn't sulking. I wasn't punishing her. I was transitioning, becoming someone she couldn't read anymore. And that terrified her more than any argument ever could. Later that night, I found her sitting on the bed, knees pulled to her chest like she used to when she was sad. But she didn't say anything, because she couldn't figure out what version of me she was dealing with. The next morning, I made coffee for one. She came downstairs, eyes puffy, voice soft. Asked if I wanted to go for a walk. I told her I had errands. She offered to come. I said I'd rather go alone. I didn't say it with anger, just with finality. She watched me put on my jacket and leave. No hug. No kiss. No see you later. And for the first time in our marriage, I knew. She was chasing, not me, but the version of me that had already left. The one who used to bend, to wait, to forgive too easily. He was gone, and in his place stood a man she didn't recognize. A man who no longer needed her permission to move on. 2 weeks in, and the silence had become louder than any fight we'd ever had. Rachel used to weaponize silence. She'd shut down, walk away, claim she needed space, every time I brought up how distant we'd become. Back then, I'd chase her, try to bridge the gap, apologize for emotions she never acknowledged. But now the silence was mine, and she was the one crumbling under it. She started asking more questions. Subtle at first. Where I was going, who I was texting, if I was seeing someone from work. I gave short, controlled answers. Nothing reactive, just calm neutrality that offered no foothold. She asked if I was okay. I said, better than I've been in a long time. That one hit her hard, because for years, she made herself the center of my peace, the measure of my happiness. And now I was calm, and she wasn't the reason. I came home that Thursday to find her sitting on the couch in tears. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet crying, like someone who had finally realized the tide wasn't turning. She looked at me, eyes searching for something, an opening, a signal that there was still time to fix it. But I didn't move toward her. I didn't ask what was wrong, because I already knew. The pain wasn't from something I did. It was from everything I'd stopped doing. The text check-ins, the goodnight kisses, the way I used to rub her back when she was anxious, even when she never asked how I was. Gone. And it wasn't out of spite. It was out of clarity. She had withdrawn long before I did. She just never thought I would stop trying. But now she saw it. In my eyes. In my posture. In the way I walked past her tears like I didn't owe them an audience anymore. I wasn't ignoring her pain. I just wasn't responsible for it anymore. That weekend, she asked if we could talk. Not with anger. Not with attitude. Just quiet desperation wrapped in soft tones. I said maybe later. Then went out for a run. Not because I was trying to prove something, but because I needed the air, the space, the feeling of motion when everything inside me had been paralyzed for so long. While I was out, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. An old friend. She said I looked good, said I seemed lighter. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Not because of validation, but because I had started living again. Not out of rebellion, but because I had stopped waiting to be loved properly. And when I walked back through that door, sweaty and calm, Rachel was still sitting on the couch. Still waiting. But I wasn't hers to wait for anymore. The next few days felt like a chess match. Rachel tried new strategies. She bought my favorite snacks. Left them on the counter like peace offerings. She laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. Made small talk like we hadn't spent the last year drifting apart in the same house. She even started getting up earlier. Showered. Dressed. Made herself visible, like proximity could fix what intimacy had already destroyed. But it was too late. I wasn't cold to punish her. I was calm because I'd stopped hoping. And when a man stops hoping, he becomes something a woman like Rachel never expects, unbothered. She used to know exactly how to get under my skin. A sigh, an eye roll, that carefully timed silence that used to make me beg for a crumb of connection. Now, I gave her nothing, and that drove her insane. Saturday afternoon, I came back from the gym to find her in my office. Not sitting, not waiting, searching. She claimed she was looking for a charger, but her eyes flicked to the drawer where I'd moved the spare key. She saw it was gone. She asked nothing, said nothing, but I saw the question in her face. Where is he going that I don't know about? That night, she wore red lipstick for dinner. Not a word about where we were eating. Not even a mention of me joining her. Just red lipstick and that dress she used to save for events. She sat across the table, smiling, waiting. I didn't compliment her. I didn't notice her on purpose. Because real attention isn't something you perform for. It's something you earn. And she'd spent too long starving me of it to expect it now. When I stood to take my plate to the sink, she asked if I wanted to watch something together. I said I had work. She looked at me like a stranger. Because that's what I was now. Familiar in face. Unreachable in presence. That's what happens when someone builds their life on the assumption that you'll never leave. They stop watering the connection. Stop checking the foundation. Until one day they wake up and realize. The house is still standing, but the man is already gone. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Gone. She texted me later that night from downstairs. A picture of the cat curled up on my hoodie. A little heart emoji at the end. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of truth. Because love doesn't survive in games. And respect doesn't return after it's been buried under years of passive disdain. She was trying now. But she was late. And all she was chasing was a ghost in a body that no longer waited for her to care. By week 3, the performance had become obvious. Rachel wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to win the version of herself she could live with. But you can't rewrite history with dinner plates and fake smiles. Not when the damage came from years of neglect, not a single argument. She started calling me by pet names again. The ones she hadn't used since before the distance took over. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I answered the same way I would a barista. She started posting more on social media. Happy wife content. Our dog. Freshly made pancakes. All smiles and filters. I wasn't in a single frame. I knew the move. It wasn't for me. It was for the world. Proof that everything was fine. That she still had what she thought she controlled. That the man she ignored could still be placed like a trophy in the background. Only I wasn't standing where she left me anymore. That Monday, she brought up therapy. Suggested we talk to someone. Just to unpack some things. But it wasn't a request. It was a test. A last-ditch attempt to reset the narrative before it completely slipped through her hands. I told her I was open to it. And I was. But not to save us. To confirm what I already knew. This marriage was a house built on memories she stopped maintaining long ago. That night, she came into the bedroom and just stood in the doorway. No phone. No distractions. Just silence. She asked if I was happy. I said yes. She waited for the rest. There wasn't any. Because I wasn't waiting for her approval to feel good anymore. The next morning, I deleted our shared calendar. Removed my name from the dinner reservations. Cleared the synced reminders. She noticed. She didn't say a word. But I watched her stare at her phone like the earth had shifted beneath her feet. Because it had. The little things that once connected our lives were now unraveling. And I wasn't doing it to hurt her. I was doing it because I no longer needed the illusion of togetherness. She thought being needed was the same as being wanted. But I didn't need her anymore. And I hadn't wanted her for a long time. Not this version of her. Not the one who looked right through me when someone else wasn't watching. She thought that bartender's comment was the start of something. She had no idea it was the final crack in a wall that was already falling apart. And now, as she tried to piece it back together, she realized. I wasn't looking anymore. I wasn't checking in. I wasn't coming back. I was simply preparing to leave, quietly, completely. And when I did, I wouldn't look over my shoulder. The morning I took off my ring, I didn't do it with ceremony. There was no dramatic pause. No sigh. No tear. I just placed it on the bathroom counter beside my watch, washed my face, and walked out the door. That's simple. Rachel didn't notice at first. She was too busy playing domestic again. Music in the kitchen, pancakes on the stove. Like we were back in some version of year 1, before the walls started to rot. I sat across from her at the table. Ate quietly. No compliments. No thanks. She smiled too much. Laughed too hard. Like she was trying to drown the silence in volume. It didn't work. She asked what I had planned for the day. I gave her a one-word answer. She asked if I wanted to watch something later. I said I'd see how I felt. Then I stood up, rinsed my plate, and left. No goodbye. No glance at her ring finger. Because by now, it didn't matter. Later that afternoon, she walked into my office. Said she needed to talk. That we couldn't keep circling like this. But we weren't circling. She was circling. I had already landed elsewhere. I let her speak. Let her throw out words like reset, connection, us. I didn't argue. Didn't even look away from my screen. When she finally asked if I still loved her, I paused. Not out of hesitation, but because it had been so long since I considered the question. So I told her the truth. I used to. She blinked like someone slapped her, then whispered something about working on it. But work doesn't bring back a burned-down house. Not when the foundation was cracked for years, and she just kept painting over the mold. That night, I changed my phone background. It used to be a photo of us on the coast, smiling, holding hands, wind in our hair like a travel magazine ad. Now it was blank. Just a black screen. Clean. Clear. Untethered. The next morning, she noticed the ring was gone. Her eyes darted to my hand as I reached for my coffee. She didn't say anything, but I saw her hands shaking, because now she understood. This wasn't a cold spell. It wasn't a punishment. It was departure. She still had the house, the routines, the fake smiles. But she didn't have me. And no matter how many candles she lit, how many conversations she forced, or how many times she said, we, the truth was louder than anything she could stage. I had left the script. And when a man leaves the script, he writes a new one. Without you. By the time Saturday came, I already knew what I was going to do. There was no rage, no dramatic exit, no suitcases at the door, just calm, precision, closure. I had spent the last 2 weeks preparing in silence, closing joint accounts, rerouting my paycheck, removing myself from anything she might cling to later. She never noticed, because she was too focused on the optics. That weekend, Rachel posted an old photo of us, one from a beach vacation 3 years ago. She captioned it, ups and downs, but still here. Still here. Those 2 words said everything. She thought survival was success. That simply not leaving meant we were still something worth capturing. But we hadn't been here for a long time. Not in the ways that matter. I didn't react to the post. Didn't like it. Didn't comment. And she noticed. She noticed when her bait went untouched. Saturday night, she made dinner again. Same dish I used to request after hard days. She had music playing, wine poured, candles lit. A setup. A trap. One last scene before the final act. I sat at the table, ate quietly. Halfway through, she asked if we were okay. I looked at her for a long second. Not with hate. Not with resentment. Just with clarity. Then I stood up, rinsed my plate, and said I needed to finish something in the office. That was the last dinner we ever shared. Sunday morning, I got up early. Packed a small duffel bag. Essentials only. I had already signed the lease on a quiet apartment across town. Simple. Clean. Mine. I didn't tell her, because telling her would have implied negotiation. And I wasn't negotiating anymore. She came downstairs as I was finishing my coffee. Her hair was messy. Her face bare. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Maybe she felt it. Maybe she knew. I walked past her. No fight. No scene. Just movement. And movement, when done right, is louder than any scream. Later that afternoon, I left the keys on the kitchen counter. The house was spotless, like I had never existed in it. No notes. No explanations. Just absence. She called me 4 times that night. Left voicemails I didn't listen to. And that silence? It wasn't meant to punish her. It was meant to free me. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No plea. No goodbye. Just disappear from the story she thought she was still writing. The first night in my new apartment, I didn't celebrate. There was no music. No unpacking montage. No glass of bourbon raised to the air. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything. Doesn't press. Doesn't suffocate. For the first time in years, I slept without tension wrapped around my shoulders like wet cloth. I woke up the next morning to a soft breeze coming through the window. Sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. No passive-aggressive questions. No fake smiles. No tension in the hallway. Just space. Rachel texted me that afternoon. First, it was casual. Where are you? Then concerned. Please call me. By nightfall, it turned. This is how you handle things now? Seriously? I didn't respond. Because I had said everything I needed to say, in silence. The following day, her sister called me. Left a voicemail saying Rachel was confused and hurt. That I owed her a conversation. But I didn't know anything. She had years to talk. She chose silence. And now, she was getting it back in full. She posted another photo that evening. A black and white shot of our wedding day. No caption. Just the image. It got hundreds of likes. But the man in that photo? He was gone. He died in pieces. Quietly. Under the weight of unmet needs and eye rolls. In the space between every time she chose the TV over conversation. Between every cold shoulder, every withheld touch, every sarcastic dismissal when I reached out. That version of me, the one she thought would always wait, was buried in the house I left behind. And this new version? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He didn't write dramatic farewell letters or send closure texts. He simply left. A few weeks later, I saw her at the grocery store. She stood 2 aisles away. Frozen. Our eyes met, just for a second. She gave a small wave, hesitant. I nodded once, then turned the corner. No confrontation. No lingering stares. Just acknowledgement. The way you nod at a chapter that's already been closed. Because some stories don't need rewrites. They just need endings. And mine ended the moment I realized she only wanted me back, the second someone else did. But by then, I had already remembered who I was before she stopped seeing me. And now? Now I didn't need her to see me. Because I saw myself again. Fully, clearly, quietly. And the final note of this story? It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was peace. And she'll hear it every time she walks through that too quiet house, wondering when exactly she lost me. Here's the answer. She didn't lose me the day I left. She lost me the moment I stopped trying to stay. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.